My husband won a massive court case and came home smiling like he'd conquered the world. I felt like the luckiest woman alive. But then my father called me into his office with documents in his hands, and everything I believed about my marriage shattered in seconds. What he revealed changed our entire lives forever. I need you to listen to every word of this story, because what I'm about to share with you will shake everything you believe about success, money, and the people closest to you. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because what happens next, nobody saw it coming. Not even me. Let's go. You ever have that moment where you think your life is exactly where it's supposed to be? That moment where you wake up and feel grateful for everything around you? That was me on March 15th. That was the day my husband walked through our front door wearing the biggest smile I'd ever seen on his face. His name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what that smile meant to me in that moment. I was in the kitchen making dinner, nothing fancy, just something simple for us to share. I heard the door open and close, and before I could even turn around, he was wrapping his arms around me, lifting me off the ground like I weighed nothing. He was laughing, actually laughing, and when he put me down, he whispered in my ear, "We won, baby, we won." I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe it was just another business deal going through. He was a commercial real estate developer, always involved in some project or another, always chasing the next big opportunity. But this time, it was different. He'd been in court for months, fighting a massive lawsuit. A competitor had sued him over a land development deal. He told me it was all a misunderstanding, that the other company was just being difficult, that he'd done everything by the book, and now the judge had ruled in his favor. Complete victory, all the charges dismissed, all the claims against him thrown out. He was free, more than free. He was vindicated. That night we celebrated like we were young again. We opened a bottle of expensive wine that we'd been saving for a special occasion. He told me stories about the trial, how his lawyer had demolished the other side's case, how the judge had basically said there was no merit to any of their accusations. He was animated, alive, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders that I didn't even know he was carrying. I watched him that night and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt proud, not just of him but of us, of what we'd built together. He was a man who worked hard, who fought for what was his, who didn't let people push him around. That's what I told myself. That's what I wanted to believe. The next morning he went back to the office like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. He was lighter somehow, more confident. He started talking about new projects, bigger deals, expansion plans. It was like the court victory had opened a door that he couldn't wait to walk through. My father called me that afternoon. I remember it so clearly because I was sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood go about its day. My father never called in the middle of the day. He was a retired business consultant, spent his whole life analyzing companies, looking at numbers, understanding how things worked from the inside out. But he was retired now, spending most of his time with his hobbies, tending his garden, reading, just enjoying life. "Sweetheart," he said, and I could hear something in his voice that made my stomach tighten immediately. "I need to talk to you about something. Can you come to the office? The old office?" He still kept a small office downtown, a place where he kept some files and records from his consulting days. I asked him what it was about, but he wouldn't say over the phone. He just said it was important and asked me to come alone, not to mention it to anyone. I drove to that office with my heart pounding in my chest. I kept trying to think of reasons why my father would need to see me so urgently. Maybe it was about my mother. Maybe something health-related. Maybe it was family business I didn't know about. But there was something in the tone of his voice that told me this wasn't going to be a normal conversation. When I walked into his office, he was sitting at his desk with papers spread out in front of him. Real papers, actual documents, not just printouts. He looked tired, not physically tired, but tired in a way that goes deeper than that. Tired like he'd been carrying something heavy for a while and it was finally getting to him. He didn't hug me. He just asked me to sit down, and then he said the words that made everything start to crumble. "I've been looking into your husband's court case," he said. "Not because I didn't trust him, but because I was bored, and your mother asked me to research something about real estate law for a friend. And when I started looking at your husband's case, something didn't add up. I remember my throat going dry. I asked him what he meant. What didn't add up? He started showing me documents, business records, email chains, court filings, bank statements, all pieces of a puzzle that I didn't want to see come together. He explained it slowly, patiently, like he was teaching a class because he knew I needed to understand this. The lawsuit against my husband wasn't actually frivolous. The other company hadn't been difficult or vindictive. They had a legitimate claim. They had purchased a piece of land based on my husband's representations about what could be built there. He told them the property was zoned for commercial development. He showed them plans. He showed them projections. Everything looked perfect. But here's the thing. He had lied. The property was never zoned for commercial development. He'd misrepresented it from the beginning. When the other company tried to build, they discovered the zoning issue immediately. They lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. They sued him for fraud. Now, normally, fraud is hard to prove in court. You need evidence. You need documentation. You need witnesses. And my husband had been smart about covering his tracks, but not smart enough. My father had found emails between my husband and a city official he knew, casual emails that seemed innocent on the surface, but when you understood the context, they showed a clear pattern. The city official had helped my husband get access to internal zoning documents before they were public, documents that showed the property would never be zoned for commercial use, documents that my husband had then hidden when he was negotiating with the other company. But the case against him had been dropped. The lawsuit had been dismissed. How was that possible if he was clearly guilty? That's when my father showed me the second set of documents, email trails between my husband's lawyers and the opposing counsel, and then between opposing counsel and the judge. Not direct communication, mind you. It was all done through intermediaries and carefully worded language that gave nothing away. But it was there. It was clear to anyone who knew how to read it. My husband had paid them to drop the case. Not a small amount, not a bribe in the traditional sense, but money had changed hands. A significant settlement to the opposing company, far less than what they would have won in court, but enough to make them go away. Enough to make them agree to disappear quietly. And the judge? The judge had a nephew. That nephew had been having some financial troubles. My father found records of a job being created at one of my husband's companies. A very well-paying job for someone with no real qualifications, a job that started right around the time the case was dismissed. I was sitting in that chair, listening to my father explain all of this, and I felt like I was watching my life fall apart in slow motion. Every word was a brick being pulled out of the foundation, and I could feel the whole structure swaying, about to collapse. The case wasn't won on the merits, my father said quietly. The judge ruled in his favor because he was paid to rule in his favor, and the other company dropped their case because they accepted a payoff. Your husband didn't win that case. He bought that case. I don't remember leaving my father's office. I know I did, but it's like that part of my life is missing. I remember driving. I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. I remember my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The worst part wasn't even the corruption itself. Don't get me wrong, that was bad. That was really bad. But what kept running through my head was something else. That other company, those people. They had done nothing wrong. They had trusted my husband. They had believed him. And he had lied to them, stolen from them, and when they tried to get justice, he had used his money and his connections to buy his way out of it. I kept thinking about who was on the other side of that lawsuit. My father hadn't given me names, but I found myself imagining them. A small business, maybe a family operation, people who probably couldn't afford to drag out a long court battle even if they wanted to, people who probably thought a settlement was their only way out, people who had been hurt and then hurt again by a system that favored money over truth. When I got home, my husband was already there. He was in his office, on a video call, talking about closing a new deal. He waved at me when I came in, but he didn't get off the call. He was too excited, too energized. He kept saying things like, "We've got momentum now, and nothing's going to stop us, and this is going to be the biggest project we've ever done." I went upstairs to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I pulled out my phone and started searching. My father had given me enough information to piece together which case he was talking about. It didn't take long to find the details. The lawsuit was public record. The company name was there. The details of what they had claimed were there. I found an article from a local business publication. It covered the original filing of the lawsuit. There was actually a quote from someone at the opposing company, a woman. She talked about how they had trusted my husband, how they had believed his representations, how they had invested everything into this deal because they thought it was a sure thing. "We made a mistake in trusting someone who didn't deserve our trust," she said. The article was from 3 months ago. I wondered what she had been doing since then, if she still had her job, if her company had survived the hit. That night, I lay in bed next to my husband while he slept. He was snoring softly, completely at peace with the world. A man who had gotten away with something, a man who had lied, cheated, and bribed his way to victory. And he was sleeping like a baby. I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark and felt something inside me breaking. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was disappointment. Disappointment so deep and so profound that I didn't know if I'd ever recover from it. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop researching. I found more information. The opposing company had indeed accepted a settlement, much smaller than they would have won in court. Some articles speculated that they had been forced to accept a lower offer because they couldn't afford to keep fighting. One article mentioned that the company had gone through layoffs a few months after the settlement. I started to piece together the full scope of what my husband had done. It wasn't just lying and bribing a judge, it was that. But it was also the ripple effects. People had lost their jobs. People had lost their livelihoods. People had been hurt by the lie, and then hurt again by the corruption that followed. And my husband had come home with a smile on his face. He had celebrated. He had opened expensive wine and told me stories about how his lawyer had crushed the other side. He had lied to me about what happened, not just with his words, but with his entire presence, his entire energy, the way he carried himself. I started to wonder what else he had lied about. How many other deals had been made this way? How many other people had been hurt? How much of our wealth came from corruption? How much of our comfortable life was built on other people's suffering? I knew I had to confront him. I kept delaying it, kept telling myself that maybe I should gather more information, maybe I should talk to a lawyer first, maybe I should figure out what I was going to do before I said anything. But I also knew that every day I waited was a day I was living a lie alongside him. It was a Saturday morning. He was in a good mood, talking about taking a trip somewhere tropical, maybe booking a vacation. I asked him to sit down. I told him we needed to talk. He immediately got defensive. He thought I was going to ask him for something or tell him I wanted to do something expensive. Men like my husband, they always think conversations are transactions. Someone wants something from them. "I know about the court case," I said. "I know you didn't win it. I know you paid to make it go away." The look on his face changed immediately. For just a second, maybe less, I saw something raw, something real. I saw fear. And then it was gone, covered up by anger. He stood up. He started pacing. He told me I didn't understand how business worked. He told me that everyone did this, that I was naive if I thought otherwise. He told me that the other company had been trying to sue him anyway, that they would have sued him regardless, that they were just looking for a payday. "That's not true," I said quietly. "They had a legitimate claim. They had evidence of fraud. You lied to them." "I sold them a product," he said, and his voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "They bought it. That's business. That's how it works." But it wasn't a product. It was land. It was their investment. It was their future, and he had stolen it from them with lies. I asked him about the judge. I asked him if he had bribed a judge. He didn't answer directly. He just kept saying that I was being hysterical, that I was overreacting, that I was letting my father poison my mind against him. "Your father's a failed consultant who never made real money in his life," he said. "Of course he's jealous. Of course he's trying to turn you against me. That's when something shifted in me. That's when I realized that no matter what I said, no matter what evidence I presented, he wasn't going to admit to anything. He wasn't going to apologize. He wasn't going to feel remorse. Because to him, this wasn't wrong. This was just how things worked. This was just business. I asked him to leave. I told him I couldn't look at him right now. He refused. He said he wasn't going to be kicked out of his own house. We argued for hours. He kept telling me that I was being unreasonable, that I was ruining our marriage, that I would regret this. But I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't unhear what I had heard. I couldn't go back to being the person I was before my father showed me those documents. What happened next unfolded over weeks and months. I hired a lawyer, not to sue my husband, but to understand my options. The lawyer told me that what he had done was criminal. It was fraud. It was bribery. But it was also complicated. It was hard to prove in a way that would hold up in court, and even if I reported it, it would involve a lengthy investigation, and I would become a witness against my own husband. I started to understand the impossible position my husband had put me in. By committing these crimes, by involving judges and lawyers and settlement agreements, he had created a situation where the only way to get justice was to betray him, and I wasn't sure I was ready to do that. I wasn't sure I wanted to be that person. My father didn't pressure me. He didn't tell me what to do. But I could see the disappointment in his eyes whenever we talked. He had raised me to believe in truth and justice and doing the right thing, and now I was wrestling with whether those things were worth the cost. I moved out. Not forever, I told myself. Just to have some space. Just to figure things out. I stayed with a friend for a month. During that month, my husband called me constantly. He was angry. He was apologetic. He was threatening. He was pleading. He cycled through every emotion trying to get me to come back. And then something happened that made the decision for me. There was a news article. A lawsuit had been filed. Not against my husband this time, but by him. He was suing the opposing company for defamation. They had apparently started talking to the local business community about what had really happened, about how the original case had been compromised, and my husband was using his money and his lawyers to threaten them, to silence them, to bury the truth even deeper. That's when I realized that my husband was never going to change. He wasn't going to have some moment of clarity where he understood what he had done. He was just going to keep doing it. He was going to keep lying, keep bribing, keep threatening, because in his world, that's what winners did. I called my lawyer, I called my father, I called the police. What I did next was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I went through with it. I gave a statement to the authorities. I told them everything my father had found. I provided copies of all the documents. I testified about conversations I had heard, about comments my husband had made, about the pattern of behavior that I had witnessed. It wasn't enough to put him in prison. The legal system is complicated, and proving corruption at the judicial level is incredibly difficult. But it was enough to trigger an investigation. It was enough to expose what he had done. It was enough to make the truth public. The court case was reopened. The opposing company got their day in court, the real day, the one that should have happened in the first place. And this time, with the corruption exposed, with the bribery brought to light, they won. They won, and they were able to recover damages. My husband's business started to fall apart. Clients didn't want to work with someone who had been exposed as a fraud and a briber. Banks didn't want to loan money to someone under investigation. His reputation, which he had been so concerned about protecting, was destroyed. All the money and all the lawyers in the world couldn't fix that. We divorced. I got half of what we had, which was tainted money anyway, money that had been earned through corruption. I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel like I had won something. I felt like I had survived something. You know what the strangest part is? It's not the anger. It's not even the betrayal. It's the fact that for years, I had been proud of my husband. I had admired him. I had thought he was someone who got things done, someone who didn't take no for an answer, someone who fought for what he wanted. But what I learned is that those qualities, without integrity, without a moral compass, without a sense of responsibility to other people, they don't make you a winner. They make you a predator. They make you someone who hurts other people for your own gain and doesn't care about the consequences. I think about that woman from the opposing company sometimes. I wonder where she is now. I wonder if she ever recovered from the hit that her company took. I wonder if she ever trusted anyone in business again. I wonder if my actions reporting what happened helped her in any way. I don't know the answer to those questions, but I know that I had to try. I had to do the right thing, even though it cost me my marriage, even though it was hard, even though I would have been more comfortable just walking away and pretending I didn't know. My father and I are closer now than we've ever been. We talk about the case sometimes, about what happened, about what it all means, and he always says the same thing. He says that karma isn't about punishment, it's about balance. It's about the universe making sure that lies eventually get exposed, that corruption eventually gets uncovered, that you can't build something real and lasting on a foundation of dishonesty. I'm not rich anymore. My divorce settlement means I'm comfortable, but I'm not the woman who was being driven around in a luxury car, who was getting her nails done at expensive salons, who was living in a mansion in the hills. And you know what? I don't miss it. I don't miss any of it. What I have now is peace. I have the knowledge that I did the right thing even when it was hard. I have a relationship with my father that's based on shared values. I have the ability to look myself in the mirror without feeling like a fraud. And my husband? Last I heard, he had moved to another state, was trying to rebuild his reputation, was involved in some new business venture. I don't know if he learned anything from what happened. I don't know if he's changed. I suspect he hasn't. I suspect he's just being more careful now, more clever about how he hides his dishonesty. But that's not my problem anymore. That's not my burden to carry. I did what I could. I told the truth. And I walked away. If you're in a situation like I was, where you know something is wrong but you're afraid of the consequences of speaking up, I want you to know something. I want you to know that doing the right thing is hard. It's really hard. It's going to cost you things. It's going to take from you, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is spending your life complicit in someone else's dishonesty. And if you're someone who's been hurt by corruption, by dishonesty, by someone who put their own gain ahead of your well-being, know that the truth has a way of coming out. It might take time. It might take someone brave enough to speak up. But the truth always comes out eventually, and when it does, justice follows, even if it's not perfect. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, if you've been through something similar, please share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you think. And please subscribe to this channel for more real stories about life, relationships, and what it means to do the right thing even when it costs everything. The life you save might be your own.